This is the CineSnob Podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 257 of the CineSnob Podcast. I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I am Cody Villafana.
Cody, we are talking Creed 3 today. And in discussing this before we record the show, you mentioned, we kind of talked boxing. You mentioned something about, the current state of boxing.
Yeah.
I don't know shit about it. You would you call you're wearing a southpaw hat. So
Yes.
Would you call yourself a fan of boxing? First of all, is that an ironic hat, or do you actually like the movie Southpaw?
It's an ironic one. I've never seen it. But
Okay, neither have I.
Not great.
So are you a fan of boxing as it stands now?
I am. Before we recorded here, I watched a boxing match, a live boxing match. Yeah.
Where? From where?
It was from Saudi Arabia, but it was.
You're playing into that whole thing, right?
Well, it speaks into the lunacy of what boxing has become. Which would you like me to get into it?
Yeah, please. I'm curious because I've never been a fan. I know that it's kind of, it's the Rocky thing was my introduction to it, and I was around for Mike Tyson's heyday.
Yeah,
playing Punch Out and shit like that, but I don't know shit about boxing today.
And I can speak as an enthusiast of it. I by no means am I an expert in anything, but it's gotten to the point where there's a few things happening. I think the first thing is that it's crooked as shit. And I think a lot of times there's a lot of fights that go to scorecards where the judges are just out of their minds scoring it incorrectly than what every person watching at home and every boxing analyst sees. And so, that's part of the thing that ruined everything. Previously, boxers were household names. I mean, you think about, Holyfield and Tyson and Foreman and
Muhammad Ali, of course.
Muhammad Ali. But even you think down to people knew who Lennox Lewis was, or
Buster Douglas.
Yeah, and now there's no big name boxers right now. You have a guy like Canelo Alvarez, who's probably one of the bigger names known, but also hasn't, there's no super fights anymore because there aren't big names in boxing that are waiting to fight each other. Everyone wanted Pacquiao and Mayweather to fight back in the day, and both those guys are done. Well, I mean, they still fight, but they're not high level competitors, which brings you to the guys who do make a lot of money. And right now, one of the biggest draws and who I was just watching was Jake Paul.
Yes, that's what I was going to bring up.
Who lost for the first time today. Maybe because he fought an actual boxer and not Nate Robinson or who
you mean slam dunk champion Nate Robinson?
Yes, I think one of his first wins, he knocked out Nate Robinson, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's so great!" Come on. And then he's fought washed out MMA fighters and stuff like that. So the state of boxing as a popular thing is now a sideshow. And so that's kind of, the whole thing where he's people are having to talk about this guy he's some legit up and comer, which I mean, he knows what he's doing, but at the same time he's not. He was, he fought a 47-year-old ex MMA guy his last fight. What are we doing here?
So is it still where people get together to watch the fight? Are there still big pay-per-views? Forgive me for sounding completely out of this, but I've never given a shit about boxing.
So that type of culture has kind of switched to UFC at this point, where they show UFC fights in movie theaters every week or every other week. People do gather for those pay-per-view events. I go to a bar every so often that is playing all of them, and that's cool. And so the sort of spectacle, big fights, gatherings, parties, watching on the big screen, that all happens almost exclusively with MMA now.
I seem to recall, wasn't it 4 or 5 years ago at least, after a big Spurs playoff loss, you and our pal Kiko were somewhere watching some fight afterward.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of the saddest pictures I'd ever seen of y'all watching this fight after this massive Spurs playoff shit the bed.
Yeah, I believe, were we watching on at a garage or garage? Yeah, that was when we lost to the Clippers. We lost the series to the Clippers that year. I don't remember what year it was, but it was the Chris Paul, Blake Griffin Clippers.
Yeah. I remember the last time I remember seeing that was a friend of mine, his bachelor party. We were at let's just call it a gentleman's club. And I got there late because I was getting off of work, and literally everything else had shut down in there except for people watching the boxing match. So I paid like $20 to get in to watch this boxing match, and I was like, I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I mean, I like boxing more than MMA, but I watch MMA more because it's not a shit show.
Is what with this boxing match you watched, this Jake Paul match, was it it was like live streamed, or was it on like ESPN? What was it on?
It was a pay-per-view.
Oh, shit. So they're still doing it. So
yeah. I mean, like the big matches are, still pay-per-view stuff. It's just like, it's probably not getting the same amount of buys as it did for like every Mayweather fight, 10 years ago, which, again, like that was the other thing where Mayweather was the biggest star and his fights were boring as shit because one, he would only take fights that he could for sure win. And then two, he was like a boring boxer to watch because he would just like, he never knocked anyone out really. He just kind of won on points and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it goes back. I mean, I remember when Kiko had a baby shower for his first kid, we all got together and watched a Mayweather fight. Or not? I guess it was a male baby shower.
Yeah, I've done those before. I don't recall going to that one, but I went. A friend of mine had one, and like the rule was we had to bring like diapers or something.
Yep, that's what we did,
and then just get blackout drunk.
He called it Pampers and Punches, I believe was the name of the event.
Pampers and Punches. Yeah. Well, since we're talking about boxing, let's go ahead and move on to reviews so we can get to talking about Creed 2. Creed 3, What do you say, Cody?
Let's do it.
Here are this week's reviews.
Like I said, first up, we have Creed 3.
The higher you get, the harder it gets. That's life.
Because this is a war. It's a fight. It's a battle.
So, how long have you known each other?
We was like brothers.
One day you came back. The past came back too.
There may have been a time when Damien had your back.
No friends in the industry.
But that's not what he's doing now.
My brothers been my brothers, man. They no kidding me a fact.
Before I got locked up, I was the best. You a coward, bro. And a fraud. Try spending half your life in a cell. Watching somebody else live your life.
I had to draw the line.
I'm just getting started, little brother.
I had to draw the line between my brothers and my enemies.
I'm coming for it all.
This is, of course, the third movie in the Creed trilogy now. I guess you would technically call this the 9th movie in the Rocky series. However, there is no Sylvester Stallone in this film.
Yes.
But it is the directorial debut of star Michael B. Jordan. Cody, tell us about Creed 3 and what you thought of it.
Yeah, so this is going to be an interesting one because I think that the early buzz, we kind of saw this. It was one of those random ones where we saw like in a vacuum where we were kind of one of the first wave of critics to see it while there was still a pretty heavy embargo. And the embargo has since been lifted, and the response is a different one than I had to it. I liked Creed fine. I was not super high on it as high as a lot of people were. I finally saw Creed 2 for the first time like last week. I watched it right before Creed 3 and I thought Creed 2 was fine. Not amazing by any stretch, and I think a little bit corny, but effective in what it was trying to do. And this one kind of follows a story where Adonis, played by Michael B. Jordan, has retired from boxing, and he is essentially a promoter where he has his own gym, and he's got some fighters that he's kind of promoting and then putting fights together. And after a training session one day, he comes outside and sees someone from his past, a guy named Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, re-entering his life, and he kind of wants to, was essentially locked up for 18 years for something that happened between the two of them as kids, and kind of Jonathan Majors was the guy who ended up like taking the fall for what happened. And during that time, he had been like working out in the gym, and when they were growing up, they were both interested in boxing, and he wants a title shot essentially coming out of jail, despite being in jail for the last 18 years. And so that kind of is the first domino that falls. And then what we see there is, a series of events that eventually leads to Adonis coming out of retirement and fighting Jonathan Majors' character, Damien. And so, my reaction and response to the movie was that I think Creed 3 is a bad movie. And which, to say that about a 90% movie right now may sound crazy, but there's a few things at play here. One of which is like the elephant in the room that you mentioned, and this is not a spoiler in any way, but there is no presence of Sylvester Stallone or the Rocky character at all in the movie. He is not referenced. There's no.
He's referenced once.
Just
exactly once when Donnie talks about the Rocky Apollo fight. Anyway, there is one solitary reference.
Okay, but there's no. He's not off screen somewhere. They don't explain his absence. He's just not there. And for me, the thing that had kind of really grounded the Creed movies, especially Creed 2, was the presence of Stallone and Rocky. And I think there are times within this movie where I think that grounding presence would have really helped some stuff that I felt was falling short. I think the second thing is that for the first time in the series, in the Creed series at least, there are some stylistic changes to the actual boxing matches. And you see that early on where they kind of like make some interesting cuts that to like showing like areas that are left open, like for body shots and stuff. But then towards the end of the fight, some CGI stuff where like the crowd is removed and stuff like that. I was not into those stylistic changes whatsoever. I think part of what made the Creed movies like interesting and stuff was that, those fight scenes were, like they were really taking punches and they seemed realistic. And this kind of I liked the realism of the boxing of those first two. And this, because of these, effects really didn't do that for me. I think that there is a lot of plot holes going on here within its story. I think that there are times where, Majors, who is good. I mean, look, Majors is good in the movie. He's the best part of the movie. But his character has a clear plan here, and none of his character's plans seem to be fleshed out in any significant way. In one instance, when you see him fight for the first time, there's like a hint that maybe he's like fighting dirty, but he's staying within the rules. And like, there's one reference to like, oh, he's learned some tricks, but they don't ever like explore his boxing style or what his plan is. And like, is he trying to injure the other person and fight unfairly, or is he trying to stay within the rules? It's never talked about. There is a thing that happens that sets the story in motion, where it is revealed that, like, I'll just say that it is revealed where he had a plan all along, and that maybe he did some things to maybe activate that plan, where it is referenced in a snippet, like a 1 or 2 second reference of a thing on like a photograph, and then it's never spoken of again. There is a character who something significant happens in Adonis's life towards like the last third of the movie that happens and then never is referenced again or never seems to affect him in any real way. And that leads me to the final piece, which is the crux of the entire movie, which is this storyline of, this guy who used to train with Adonis back when they were kids, being in jail for 18 years, and then demanding and ultimately getting a world championship title shot despite not having any professional fights under his belt. The last time he fought was like Golden Gloves, amateur stuff when he was a teenager. And, I said this to you, I think, but even as preposterous and ridiculous and absurd as modern boxing is, the story is just completely unbelievable. Like, it's something that would never happen. And I feel like, even though Rocky movies, I haven't seen like the ones that get really goofy, but even though there's like some ridiculous stuff in this, the Creed movies are grounded in reality and realism. And for a series that is grounded in that, to have its main story be so not believable, for me, it was hard to suspend disbelief because the idea behind it was so ludicrous and ridiculous. And so, what it ends up being is kind of like, Adonis sort of like fighting against himself in many ways. And you get your training montages as he comes back and like, feeling like he has to, take the fight that everyone is again telling him not to take and everything like that. And again, just the whole thing seemed like it was like really missing a grounded something to it. And I think that something may have been Rocky. So I think, people can talk about like this being the departure and for kind of the story to kind of take that, take the baton and run with it. But I don't think that the story is strong enough. I don't think that the script is nearly strong enough. I don't like the directorial choices that are made. I don't like the way in which the story is told and unfolds. Just nothing about this movie really worked for me on any level.
Yeah, the Rocky thing is a huge hole for me. I know a lot of people are okay with the passing of the baton. Like you, I hadn't seen, for whatever reason, I didn't see Creed 2 until just a few weeks ago. For the record, I loved the first Creed. I thought it was really great, really like refreshing. And, people will point to the Rocky stuff. Like, I mean, it's clearly of its time. And clearly stuff like that wouldn't work now. Like the idea that this is like Rocky was always painted as the perennial underdog, because he was, a small Italian guy fighting, these giant, professional boxers. Anyway, I think this movie makes the mistake that, it leans too far back into that mode of storytelling. Like, it leans a little too far back into the kind of preposterousness of the Rocky series that came before. And I don't think this isn't like on the level of like some Rocky 5 street fighting bullshit, or even kind of the video game simulation of Rocky Balboa. I mean, that's cornball, but first things first, you've already got the character canonically being damn near 40 years old. Mm-hmm. And they're still calling him like a young fighter. Like, hold on. Apollo Creed died in 1985. So this would make him like pushing 40. The Jonathan Majors character, Damien, is older than him. It already fudges the timelines a little bit. And this movie plays as a pretty big retcon, I think. You get a lot of this, and I think we had a clip in the trailer, like, how come you never told me about this? So it's writing in this backstory for Adonis that I don't know that it's necessarily like, I don't know that it needed to be told, and I don't know that it entirely works. Because you have this character who was, again, a major part of his life, that is just now being mentioned. I get it. The movie sets up a lot of like parallels and mirrors. There's a lot of mirror imagery, and this is, like you said, essentially Adonis fighting himself. But like you said, there's some really paper thin characterization to the Damien character, where you're meant to see him as a villain, like complete with evil henchmen in the middle of the movie that come out of nowhere. After he improbably wins a world championship, and then by the end of it, you're meant to sympathize with him again.
Right.
First of all, you've got this guy, Adonis Creed, retired heavyweight champion of the world, multi-millionaire, was already rich anyway. Like the movie, like he starts the first movie wealthy, with living with Apollo Creed's widow as his adopted mother. But then you get like him like kicking around this shitty gym, like getting kicked out by the trainer. Like there's still tries to build in this underdog story that, like you said, with the preposterousness of boxing the way it is, like it doesn't work. This is one of the most famous fucking athletes in the world at this point. And that he's like going out to, and even Creed 2 did this, where he's like going out to small restaurants and shit. Like it just doesn't work. And the idea that he could essentially create this other megastar by accident in the Damien character, like, hold on, like, what's happening? Like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, but again, like, the circumstances that happen, like, in no world would there not be like another 5, 10, 15 people to take the fight that Damien ends up taking,
right,
in any of it. And like that, and again, it just feels so preposterous to me. It's so hard for me to get over.
Well, and I would buy it a little more if it was like, hey, I'm the fucking promoter, I'm going to do this.
Or how about if Damien was like a rising boxer, like in the professional field before he, things happened and he went to jail, and you like establish that, but you establish him as like a Golden Gloves teenage boxer at that point with no professional record. It's just I don't know.
Yeah, and then there's the notion in the middle where there's like the heel turn for Damien, as though something of value has been taken,
right?
And it's Adonis's responsibility to get it back to save the day. That's a weird plot point for a movie that is released in 2023 in a series that was relatively grounded in reality, the reality of professional boxing. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's a disappointment compared to, especially the first Creed. I don't have a strong opinion of Creed 2. I think it does a pretty good job, but I feel like this one, it feels like it's missing something. Like you mentioned, it's missing the Stallone thing for sure. It feels like it's missing a little bit of the heart that the first one had. The idea that this is like, it mirrors Rocky 3 a little bit, especially in like the simultaneous punch thing that happens in the film. Mm-hmm. It just feels like something's up. I don't dislike the direction. I think the stylistic choices are interesting. It's not necessarily what I would have picked for this movie, but I think Michael B. Jordan puts a little bit of a stamp on it. It gets a little impressionistic near the end of the movie, which I don't know it entirely works.
Yeah.
But the idea that this feels like a big retcon, that it feels like, like, let me just say, like, I feel like everything that happened with the Felicia Rashad character was meant to happen to Rocky in a previous draft.
That makes sense.
I don't know. I don't dislike it. I'm disappointed by it, especially after the high of something like the first Creed, which I, again, fucking loved. And even the competent kind of going through the motions of Creed 2. Anyway, Cody, what did you think of, what's your grade for Creed 3?
Yeah, so I again, I just don't think that the narrative really works for me. I don't like the stylistic choices of it. I think that Damien as a character is a written flaw with flaws. I guess I would say. So unlike you, I do think that it is a bad movie. I give it a C.
A C, wow. I'm gonna give it a B minus. I think it's a decent enough time. I think it's not a bad movie. I just think it's got some flaws that I don't know that I can totally overlook. to the point where it's going to be something that, like, I would revisit the first Creed way before I'd revisit this Creed at all. I do hope the series continues. I don't know where it can go. I hope it gets a little more realistic or gets back to being grounded, but I don't know. If this were to wrap it up, I'd be okay with it too.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next movie, Operation Fortune.
Turns out everyone thinks you're a superstar, Danny. Once they heard you were in town, they came to us.
Stop. I don't think I could do this. No.
Danny?
Nope.
Danny.
Trust yourself. No need to be nervous.
No reason to be nervous. They're only killers.
We've all seen you handle killers before, on screen.
Fundamentally, there's no difference.
What do you think an agent does? They act. And no one acts better than you, Danny. The best agents are stars, and the best actors are movie stars.
I guess that's sort of true.
You're an actor. Act.
From nowhere, Josh Hartnett, by the
Yeah.
way. I didn't see this movie. Cody, you did. It's the latest from director Guy Ritchie.
Yes, it's, Guy Ritchie has kind of like had a very strange last few years. Making in the same year, I believe, making Aladdin, which I did not care for all that much, and then The Gentleman, which I did care for quite a bit, which I thought was a really good movie. Wrath of Man came out in between this and those movies, which I did not like, but so it's interesting in that, like, it is not like it's not like the return to form to Guy Ritchie that The Gentleman was, where like the dialogue was super snappy and you had like really memorable, fun characters. But it's also not kind of like a bore fest, which I think a lot of his stuff has been in the past. So really what you get, and like, to its credit, I think the movie starts off stronger than it finishes, because it starts off like kind of giving you a very quick setup of what's going on, which is like there was like a heist of a doodad that is of unknown power. They don't really know what they're going for. They just know that something was heisted and stolen, and that it's being sold to someone else. And so Jason Statham plays like a secret agent or whatever. Operation Fortune, or what's his?
Orson Fortune.
Orson Fortune, a terrible name.
That sounds like the rural juror.
Yeah, it's not only though a terrible name. It is also it's also a terrible title of the movie. The title Operation Fortune. Ruse de Guerre is a fucking awful name. But anyway, so he's like, he plays like a government agent who is like the off the grid guy who you get when you have to do like some real dirty work, and they put together a team.
No way.
Yeah.
No.
That involves like Aubrey Plaza, and then eventually Josh Hartnett becomes involved. And I really liked the simplistic setup of it, which is just like, we don't need a ton of backstory. You actually get your exposition coming from the leader, who is played by Carrie. How do you say his? Is it
Carrie Elwes?
Elwes, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Carrie Elwes.
It's played by Carrie Elwes, who is the kind of like leader of everything, leader of the agency, and he's explaining what's happening, and then in the background you're like seeing the heist happen with no audio and stuff. So it's like a real quick setup, and then you get like right into it. And I really appreciated like not buckets and buckets of exposition leading off. Now there is buckets and buckets of exposition that happens closer to the third act, but what you get is like a movie that has like, it's kind of like a typical kind of like spy espionage kind of thriller where, Aubrey Plaza plays like the computer hacker part, and then there's another character who's like a driver and stuff, and then, Hartnett is doing like undercover work as himself and stuff. He plays an actor in the movie, not Josh Hartnett, but like a movie star. I should clarify that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
But I actually found it to be funny. I think the tone really works. I think that having Aubrey Plaza in the movie really helps, and I think that she's really good in it. And like she's not anywhere out of place in this like spy action comedy. Like The Gentleman, it features a like kind of like fantastic, mildly over the top Hugh Grant, who it's like keeps delivering like really fun and interesting performances in recent years. and who in his character is sort of like a super fan of Josh Hartnett's character, and so that's their way into everything. But you have, people going undercover and like and stuff like that. Where it really starts to get bogged down is that when the tech that's like that they're actually after is like revealed, then it gets sort of bogged down in like exposition, nonsense. What we call it, a MacGuffin, right?
Just a doodad that they're looking at. Yeah, MacGuffin, whatever.
Yeah. And so that's, I think the third act kind of falls apart a little bit. But that being said, like, I found it to be enjoyable. I like when Statham is able to do like a little bit of comedy, and like has a little bit of self-awareness. There's some stuff that doesn't necessarily work. Like his character has like an obsession with high-end wine, and like they keep on spending a bunch of money on him. Like doing these missions, like that's what he demands, is like that kind of stuff. But all in all, I wouldn't say like it's a return to form to Guy Ritchie. Like it doesn't have any like visual style to speak of that's interesting, and it doesn't have, like I said, the snappy dialogue or the like memorable characters. But it has like a fun script. It has a good tone to it. I like the balance of humor and action within it. And, I don't think it's something that I would necessarily like ever watch again, but, for a spy action comedy, not too bad.
All right. Well, what's your grade for Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre?
My grade is a B-.
B-?
I would recommend it.
Cool. Well, that's going to do it for this week. Next week, Cody, the Oscars, is it already next week?
It absolutely is. And,
My God.
We'll talk logistics, but
one of these days. Yeah. Also, we'll be you and I will be going to South by Southwest.
Yeah, you make your triumphant return.
My triumphant return, the first time since 2019. Well, I guess the first time. I don't remember the last time I saw a movie there. Was it 2019? Shit, I don't remember. That feels like a million years ago now, but it feels like yesterday too.
Yeah, I mean, that probably does sound right, though.
I do believe that was the last time I was there. Let's see, what movies came out in that. God, I don't remember. Was that when Trainspotting 2 premiered? Am I going crazy? I didn't see that.
Maybe. I really don't know.
Man, I don't know. I'd really have to go back and remember this. But it was not. Stuber played there.
Oh my God.
That I don't even remember ever seeing, I don't think. Headliners, let's see. Booksmart opened there. I don't believe I saw it there. The Highwaymen, that was I think that was a big Texas one.
Mm-hmm.
Pet Sematary. Us was at South by. I don't think I saw any of those there.
I don't think I did either.
But those were the big Stuber. They showed a work in progress of Stuber. Can you imagine? Like,
no. I've seen one work in progress movie at South by. It was Disaster Artist. It was a work in progress when we watched it, right?
Yeah. I don't remember much changing in it.
I didn't either.
I did. The only real like work in progress movie I've ever seen that like literally did change was The Campaign.
Oh yeah, I remember you've told me about this.
Yeah. That's one of the most like, and that was like a month out of release and they were still cutting it. Anyway.
Crazy.
If you want to reach us, you can email us at podcast@cinesnob.net. Find us on Twitter at CineSnob, Facebook CineSnobNet, youtube.com/CineSnob. Cody, you're on Letterboxd.
Letterboxd.com/CineSnob Cody. If you want to keep track, South by Southwest is right around the corner. And if anyone is following along or there and wants to know what to see or what the buzz is like, follow me.
Yeah. I don't know what days I'll be attending, but I wonder if the days of like you were there last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the first kind of in-person return.
Yeah.
Was it back to full strength yet?
The crowds were lighter for sure, especially as you got further in the week. Typically speaking, the back half of South by Film is pretty, sparsely attended because the music starts midway through and the people who have like the badges for everything shift to that. But last year was definitely a different vibe. It was not as crowded.
I'm curious if your stated goal before was to never pay for a meal.
Oh,
like
yeah.
The first couple days would still work.
You know, I've actually, you know, I've in last year, one thing I did was I stayed a whole day at Lamar, just to avoid downtown, and like park for free was also a benefit for that. And that was the one day that kind of killed me, because you're like eating Draft House food, or you're eating like Shake Shack. Or
I know you'll be at Shake Shack. I fucking knew it.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing I remember, food wise, do you remember when Pizza Hut introduced, I mean, sorry, not Pizza Hut, 7-Eleven introduced like their pizza, and they would like, all you had to do was like tweet about it, and they'd bring you a pizza on the street.
Yeah. There's been some good ones. There was the McDonald's food truck. Years ago, where you could just go every day and get McDonald's. I was
interviewed for Fortune for one of the
Oh yeah.
I was such a douche.
I was interviewed. You fucked me up. I stood in the rain one night for Shake Shack. Seth Meyers was there, and he brought a Shake Shack food truck, and so I waited for a free meal there. I've got some other tips for you that I'll tell you off mic.
Oh, there was one year that Subway was there selling their giving away their terrible pizzas.
Ugh.
Oh, it was so gross. All right, Cody, anything else before we go?
No, that's all.
All right, on that note, I'm Jerrod Kingery.
I'm Cody Villafana.
Thank you for listening to the CineSnob Podcast. To read reviews, interviews, and more, visit cinesnob.net. See you next week.